Are we ready?
Rabbi, we're ready.
Awesome. Boker Tov. Good morning, everybody. At 9:34. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry that I'm a little bit late, but now I can give this shir with a more of a clear mind. Actually, I'm not sure how much of a clear mind I have. Last night, after the conference of Shluchim in the north, near Zion, I had the great zechut to go to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Miron, and I stood in the same place where, unfortunately, a few days ago there was a terrible tragedy, and we said Mishna and we said Tehillim, and there were over 50 of the Hatzalah members that saved lives, did a super heroic acts of kindness and chesed, and just something else. If you want the videos, I posted it on my status, and if you want, just send me a message and I'll send you some of the videos and pictures. Then we had a Farbrengen in there. A few of the shluchim came to Miron. And then I drove back at 1:30. I stopped off middle of the way, and I slept for a couple of hours, and I came right back, went to the mikvah, and Davin Shachris dropped off my dovi, and now we're doing the shir. Baruch Hashem. So this is really a great zechut. So we're up to Perek Rishon, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Vav, Mishnah 6. In the last couple of Mishnahs, we learned about how the pairs of rabbis that passed the Torah down, they were like the leading rabbis of the generation. In the previous Mishnahs, it was Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan. And today we're going to move on to Mishnah Vav, where we have a new pair. Yehoshua ben Prachia, Yehoshua the son of Prachia, and Nitai Harbeli. So let's learn the Mishnah inside. Hopefully you have the Pirkei Avot with you. Yehoshua ben Prachia, the Nitai Harbeli kiblu mehem. Yehoshua ben Prachia, the Yehoshua the son of Prachia, and Nitai from Arbel received from them. Who are them? Who are they? The previous two Mishnahs, Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan. So the Mishnah Vav, Mishnah Vav, the sixth Mishnah, is going to deal with Yehoshua ben Prachia, and Mishnah Zayin is going to deal with Nitai Harbeli. So we're going to learn now the three things that Yehoshua ben Prachia teaches us. Yehoshua ben Prachia Omer, Yehoshua the son of Prachia says three things. Each one is a bomb. Each one is a pillar of Yiddishkeit. Let's start with number one. Aseh lecha rav. Make for yourself a rav. Soon we'll get into the details, but basically it means you should have your rav, someone who is a mentor, someone who will teach you halacha, someone who will guide you in Torah. Every person needs to have a rav. Number two, uknei lecha chaver. And acquire for yourself a pal, a friend. Number three, v'hevei dan et kol ha'adam l'kaf zechut. You should judge every person meritoriously. So let's do one thing at a time. I'd like to start with the Bar Tanura, because that's the basics. Then we can build on to the Hasidic interpretation. Aseh lecha rav, so the Bar Tanura quotes the Rambam. That the Rambam says that even though that a person may not be worthy to be your Rav, nevertheless, you should appoint him as being your Rav, because it's better than being alone. In other words, it's very important, not only important, but crucial, that a person has some kind of guidance. Usually, the guidance that a person seeks is from a person that you feel that that person can be your Rav, your spiritual mentor. Now, what happens if there's someone that's a great Torah scholar? So no one should say, "I'm too great to have a mentor." What do you mean? Every person needs a mentor. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking about some of the shuls, some of the important shuls, the prominent shuls in Rechavia. And there's a very strange what's the word I'm looking for? It's a very strange occurrence that several of them don't have a Rav, don't have a rabbi of the shul. And so the most common reply when I ask people, why is it so? They say, because we don't need a Rav. One of the guys here knows the entire Shas, the entire Talmud. Another person gives the speech on Shabbos. Another they pretty much get they get by. They're able to figure things out. And my response to that is, my humble response to that is, that having a Rav, and that's the point that the bartender is quoting over here, having a Rav, having a mentor, is not just to be able to tell you what the Shulchan Aruch says. You might have the greatest geniuses in the shul. Every shul needs a Rav. That's what I believe. Every shul needs to have a mentor. Over here we're talking about an individual person who is putting for themselves a mentor. But it also applies to having a leader, a spiritual leader of the congregation. And I think that's crucial. Then the Bartanura says his own interpretation. That was quoted from the Rambam. Now he says his own interpretation. He says that when it says Aseh lecha Rav, it means you should have one Rav. This person is your guide. Now it doesn't mean that you can't learn from multiple people. You can look at, for example, you can hear shiurim and go to different classes from all different types of rabbis, or from a few rabbis. But to have your Kabbalat Torah, your main theme, your main receiving, or in the yeshiva, they use the word derech. Derech doesn't just mean a way, it also means a thought process, a Kabbalah, a receiving of the Torah that you get from this Rav. That's one of the reasons why one of the most important parts of receiving the Rav from the Rav is, it's called shimush, following the Rav around and learning hands-on how to do the mitzvahs. So, for example, 2 days ago, I was at a bris milah, circumcision, and as it happens very often, the mohel, he had one person, sometimes there's more, that follow him around. So it's not just learning the Shulchan Aruch and guiding you, but you have to be hands-on and see how he actually does the mitzvah of the brit milah. By the way, this message of Aseh lecha Rav is very much connected to the entire concept of this Pirkei Avot, especially the first 2 chapters, where the Torah is being passed down from generation to generation. So it's not just that the greatest rabbis, the Nasi, the prince, or the Av Beit Din, the leader of the Beit Din, they're the ones who pass down the Torah. That's on a general level, and that's very important, and it's true. But each and every one of us, you and I, also have a part in the passing down the Torah. That's why it's so important for you and I and every person to have our own Rav. That this Rav should be able to guide us spiritually. I would like to add a couple of points to this very important message from Yehoshua ben Prachia. First of all, it's a very painful thing that I'm going to share with you, but I'm going to say it. Sorry, this is just very, very difficult for me to express. In the dynasty of Chabad, it's not just that we have 7 Rebbes, and each Rebbe, starting from the second one, received the position from the previous Rebbe. It's that in some way, the previous Rebbe indicated who should be the next Rebbe. Amongst us, amongst Hasidim, it was known, for example, that at a certain point, the previous Rebbe would, for example, put on the gartel, dress the gartel that we put on around our waist before davening. So at a certain time, at a certain important time, the previous Rebbe would always, that was a symbol, a sign that this person would be the next Rebbe. But unfortunately, our Rebbe did not appoint anyone to be the next Rebbe. So really this leads into a whole other subject. But I'm sure we've talked about this in the past, and we should definitely dedicate a special shiur for this subject. But first of all, if you're asking about one of the reasons for it, because the Rebbe, in fact, was a very, very responsible person. He also had a will, and it's very, very strange. It's very, very, it's not the norm. It's not the type of thing the Rebbe would do just to leave us hanging out there. So, first of all, it's clear that the Rebbe's inspiration continues to guide us today too, through his letters, through his teachings. And as you see clearly, how often does it happen? Very often, that people would stop into the Chabad Center and they say to me, what would the Rebbe say in this world crisis? People just this past Friday evening, the same day that we learned about the terrible tragedy that happened in Miron by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai on Lag BaOmer. And people were thirsty to hear what the Rebbe's message is. As we spoke in great detail on Friday night and also Shabbos by day, 2 separate concepts of the Rebbe's insights. Also, the Rebbe clearly said that Mashiach is coming very soon, literally. Well, if the Rebbe would give people tens, if not hundreds of people blessings for life-threatening issues, and people would follow the Rebbe's advice, sometimes and very often even in contrast and despite medical advice. And people didn't say, oh, the Rebbe means in the spiritual realm. But they listened to the Rebbe in the most practical way. So, for sure, if he said this was his main wish, his main aspiration, the Rebbe lived and breathed redemption. How much more so that it's momentarily, Bezrat Hashem. We're not going to have to wait too much longer. I hope it's this very moment. But why am I mentioning all of this now? Because the Rebbe did indicate, once that I know, a type of will, what to do after his passing. And that was right at the end of the Shiva of the Rebbe's wife. In 1988, it was the second day of Adar, 2 weeks before Purim, and the Rebbe said a talk. It was very, very difficult for us to hear these words, but the Rebbe said, basically built on this subject of Aseh L'Charav, and he said that if a person has a halachic question in the event, in general, the Rebbe would always send for halachic issues to a Rav. But he clearly said that for halachic issues and spiritual issues, asay l'charav, a person should have a rav, and this person the rav they should go to. For medical issues, a person should consult with a rofei yedid, a doctor who is a good friend of the. How precious that advice is, how priceless that advice is. To consult always with a doctor who is a friend. Doesn't mean that they have to do the surgery or that they have to actually prescribe the medicine. But to consult with a rofei yedid. Then I want to talk about one more issue about asay l'charav, and that's called in Chabad, it's called a mashpia. Mashpia is a spiritual mentor. And in the summer of 1986, the Rebbe made a very big deal of this campaign. Every person should have a spiritual mentor. A spiritual mentor, the Rebbe even said once that the brachas come through your spiritual mentor. I remember when I was in yeshiva and I wanted to choose my spiritual mentor. And the Rebbe says it doesn't even have to be a teacher from yeshiva, or it doesn't have to be, everyone chooses someone who they feel that they connect to your neshama. And I remember I wanted someone really, really special to be my mashpia. And till today, Baruch Hashem, may he live for long and happy and healthy years. He's my mashpia. And I was I was concerned that he wouldn't agree because he's such a humble person. He's truly an amazing individual. So I brought the sicha that the Rebbe talks about. I brought the book. And I showed it to him. I said, hey, look over here. The Rebbe says in the book that you have to have a mashpia. I would like you to be my mashpia. So he didn't have much of a choice. So then the Rebbe talked about every community having a mashpia. Then the Rebbe also talked about that in Crown Heights, I think other places as well, but for sure I know in Crown Heights, every block should have a mashpia. In other words, the concept of asay l'cha, and the Rebbe based it on these words, asay l'cha rav. A person should make for themselves a rav, a mentor. So these three words are so powerful, and they're very, very important. And the more you think about it, the more you realize how necessary, how crucial it is for every person to have a mentor, whether it's a halachic mentor or a spiritual mentor, whatever it is, it's important to have a asay l'charav. Let's move on to point number 2 that Yehoshua ben Prachia says. He says, Uknei l'cha chaver. You should acquire for yourself a friend. What does that mean? You should acquire for yourself a friend. It means that a person needs to have a friend. Not just a friend, but a good friend. It's almost as like the tale goes that you had two guys in Russia that would drink for years in the bar. They would drink, drunks, two drunks. And one day, sitting in the bar, they had a full cup, and one guy says to the next, Ivan, do you love me? So Ivan says, Igor, of course I love you. They take another gulp down of beer or Stolochanaya or some kind of vodka, Beluga. And the guy says, Ivan, do you love me? And Ivan says, Igor, we've been drinking for 55 years. Of course I love you. So then Igor says to Ivan, so can you tell me what's bothering me? He says, how can I tell you what's bothering you? You didn't tell me. You didn't share it with me. He goes, you don't really love me. In other words, there's a concept of having a friend, and a friend needs to be someone who's truly, deeply connected with you. Or like a person it's a very prominent person and has many, many friends, and Unfortunately, more often than not, the friends are there because they have an ulterior motive. They want to get something, benefit something from that individual. And then all of a sudden, when the person is not a public figure anymore, or a person, God forbid, loses their wealth or a portion of it, then all of a sudden people stop consulting, stop talking. Like one person told me that when he lost a significant amount of wealth, unfortunately, all of a sudden he became stupid. When he was rich, then everybody consulted with him, everybody spoke to him, but all of a sudden he became stupid. All of a sudden no one called him anymore, no one consulted. And so one person said that in a time of need, that's when you can tell who your true friends are, who's really there for you. Sometimes, in order to acquire a friend, in order to have a friend, you have to acquire the friend. Doesn't necessarily mean to pay the person to be your friend. It means to do things, to give the person incentives that the person should want to be connected to you. But I would like to hope that once you get into this relationship of being in contact, having a bond with a good person, then it becomes more natural. It's very, very important. It's very important for a person to have a friend. Then there's a deeper interpretation that it says in Hayom Yom, ukne is like a quill, like a pen or a feather that writes. Ukne lecha chaver. A pen should be to you like a chaver. Today, maybe it's more your cell phone or your iPad, but it's important to be able to write things down, to record, and that a person's pen, the talent of writing and expressing oneself, that should be to a person like a friend. And last but not least, which we're going to expand upon this Bezrat Hashem tomorrow, is the third point, v'havedanet kol ha'adam l'kav zchut. We have to judge everyone meritoriously. If we see a person, we don't know who they are. So we have to judge them meritoriously, and we say, most probably the person is a tzaddik. And this is a very important message for today's day and age. Unfortunately, a lot of people today, they're into labeling. And people say, oh, you see a person? Oh, this person is probably like this. Or that person is probably like that. Who are we to decide and to label someone to be A, B, or C? So first of all, the moment that we see someone, we should right away assume that the person is a tzaddik. And even if we see that a person did something which doesn't exactly coincide with being a tzaddik, nevertheless, we should still judge them favorably. And we should say, maybe the person didn't know. Or maybe the person had a big yetzer hara, an evil desire. But if they would have had more love and more affection, then they would not have done what they did. So we are now concluding today's shir. Thank you so much for joining us. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow morning right here at 9:30, we'll be continuing Mishna Vav. So today was lesson 1. And Friday morning, Bezrat Hashem, Kabbalah Cafe. All the best.